I'm carrying the shopping from my crazy Thursday. I'm happy to go back to the dorm. Oliver, the school hunk, suddenly stops me. His eyes are red. He says, "It's okay. There's still a chance. We're not divorced yet. This time, let's start over." I scratch my head. A little puzzled, I say, "Classmate, I don't know you." Oliver says, "He's handsome like the hero of a comic book. He's the ideal type in the hearts of many girls. My best friend Sophia was one of them. She said Oliver would definitely take over the family business in the future. He would make a big splash in the business world. She was determined to win him over, live the life of a rich wife. But Oliver was cold-hearted. He kept his distance from everyone. Then one day, her best friend had a car accident after waking up. She patted my head, angrily said, "You're such a flirt. Don't even think about Oliver. You can't marry him." I looked at her in surprise. "If you want to scold someone, scold yourself. Why did you hit me? Besides, Oliver is not someone I can marry if I want to. The Smith family is the richest in the city. He is the heir to a business empire. Their family must be looking for a marriage partner of a similar status. How could someone like me possibly catch their eye?" Before I could react, my roommate Emily patted her best friend on the head. "Are you okay? Did you get confused? She doesn't have a boyfriend yet." My best friend suddenly burst out laughing. "That's great." She was so happy that tears were about to fall. She endured the pain and ran over to give me a tight hug. "That's great. My Lucy doesn't have a boyfriend yet in this life. I will never let you marry that jerk." My best friend pushed everyone else out of the hospital room. She took a deep breath and slowly revealed the truth. She confessed that she was actually a reincarnated person from a previous life. I tripped at the school party and fell into Oliver's arms. Oliver was wearing a suit and looked particularly handsome. He instinctively reached out to catch me. We both spun around, and we both fell together. I was on top, and he was on the bottom. Oliver didn't react, and I didn't feel anything, but the school found out. Our affair was the talk of the school. Oliver didn't deny it. He tacitly approved of our relationship. So, he introduced me to his family. They didn't care about social status. They saw that I had a degree, was cheerful, and looked good. They were eager for us to get married. So, I married into a wealthy family, but the good times didn't last long. 5 years after we got married, Oliver handed me a divorce agreement. He told me he never had any feelings for me. After hearing this, I nodded and said that this was indeed like his style. Oliver and I were simply not the same type of person. Suddenly I asked, "Do I have any children?" My best friend paused for a moment and answered, "Yes. 1 son and 1 daughter. They were both awarded to the Smith family." I was so shocked that I dropped my hand. The hamburger fell onto the bed sheet. The white bed sheet was immediately stained red with ketchup. My best friend didn't get angry. Instead, she held my head tenderly in her arms. Those ungrateful brats. "Forget it." Finally, my best friend stared at me seriously. "I promised her solemnly that for the rest of my life, even if no one wants me, I will never marry Oliver. I will never give him children." In the following months, my best friend kept me by her side. Like a shadow, she avoided all places where she might run into Oliver. Actually, she was worrying for nothing. Oliver and I were never really in the same social circle. Oliver was the heir to a business empire. He was also a celebrity at school. And I was just an ordinary girl, not very pretty. I liked food but not sports. I had seen him at a school event before. He was surrounded by a group of girls. He didn't even notice me standing in the corner. Besides, it had been 5 years. Oliver had always said he didn't like me, even if we happened to meet. What difference would it make? My best friend told me with a meaningful look, "You're still young. You don't understand these things. He doesn't really like you, but he's been hanging around you for 5 years. She said this with a sneer. I grew increasingly disgusted with Oliver. If he had been reborn too, he might still be hanging around you. Rebirth is something, you can't just wish for it. At that time, I didn't take it seriously at all. I ran into some rich girl classmates who used to look down on us. My best friend was acting very differently. She went up to them and started chatting. After they had left, my best friend sighed. Life is like a dream. It hasn't been easy for them. But as soon as she heard that Oliver's childhood friend had also been accepted to the school, her face immediately changed. That girl came from a normal family, but she had a very arrogant personality. As soon as she entered the school, she always surrounded Oliver. The school was full of rumors about the two of them. My best friend rolled her eyes, but she didn't say anything. I didn't want to ask any questions. The sun was shining. The school was full of energy. Time passed quickly. In the blink of an eye, It was the day my best friend was worried about. At the school anniversary party, my best friend held my hand tightly. She refused to let go. She kept looking at her phone, counting the time in the past when Oliver and I met. After a long time, she finally let out a sigh of relief. It seems that the danger has passed. I really can't hold it in anymore. On the way to the bathroom, I accidentally bump into someone around the corner. He is exceptionally handsome. He is completely at the level of a god. He is so handsome, you can't help but keep looking at him. When he sees me, he obviously freezes for a moment. When I walk past him, he suddenly speaks. "Lucy, you hate me so much that you don't even want to look at me." I turned around and locked eyes with the handsome guy. He frowned and said, "Why pretend not to know me? You always avoid me on purpose. Don't you want to forget the past? But you're not getting what you want." Hearing these words of discontent, I realized that he was Oliver. He looked as handsome as a celebrity. My best friend had made a mistake. In fact, I took advantage of him, seeing that I didn't say a word. Oliver's tone turned even colder. "You have to avoid me. You won't even say a word to me." He clenched his fists. His knuckles turned white. His eyes stared at me sharply. He looked very unhappy. I had to go to the bathroom. "Hey, man, my best friend won't let me talk to you." I took off running. I heard Oliver's voice behind me. "Lucy, after all, we were once husband and wife, even if I was wrong. Can't we even be just friends?" His tall figure stood there. His face even had a hint of grievance. I couldn't guess what he was thinking. Why did he have to be friends with me? Back at the party, I told my best friend what happened when I ran into Oliver. She crushed her drink glass in her hand and sneered. Her eyes were full of hostility. She looked through the crowd and into the distance. There sat a tall man in a white shirt. That must be Oliver. I kept my head down as I ate my snacks. I didn't even dare breathe loudly. The party was only halfway through. A girl walked onto the stage to perform. She danced a beautiful ballet, immediately capturing everyone's attention. There was loud applause from the audience. She was Oliver's childhood friend, Isabella. Her dance moves were light and graceful, winning the audience's enthusiastic applause. Everyone praised her for dancing very well. Isabella gave a small smile and said softly, "In the past, Oliver played the piano, I danced. That was the perfect combination. I really miss those childhood days." She said softly. Her tone was calm. The boy in the white shirt paused with the glass in his hand. His movement slightly froze. Oliver obviously heard this. His best friend snorted disdainfully. What an act. An idea suddenly popped into my head. Could it be that she was the trigger for Oliver and I to divorce? Oliver stopped my best friend and me. I was even more convinced of this suspicion. He asked, "Lucy, you didn't bully Isabella just now, did you?" I already said. "She has nothing to do with this." Before I could finish my sentence, my best friend dragged me behind her. She played her part really well. Her expression was just right. She had a complex expression on her face. She looked both puzzled and angry. There was also a sense of protectiveness and a little panic. "How dare you accuse her? My best friend doesn't even know that girl, and she certainly doesn't know you. That's rude." Oliver is stunned. He was in such a hurry. He forgot that this isn't his past life anymore. He stares at my face. All he sees is a face full of, "Is there something wrong with this guy? Please behave yourself." My best friend pulls me away. Oliver reaches out without thinking. He wants to take my hand. I jump back and hid behind my girlfriend, like a little chicken hiding behind its mother hen. Oliver's face immediately turned rigid. "So you hate me that much?" I nodded vigorously, without the slightest hesitation. Oliver said with a serious face, "In that case, why didn't you refuse to sleep with me for the past 5 years? He just finished speaking, and my girlfriend immediately slapped him. My girlfriend was shaking with anger. "You're still talking nonsense, Oliver. If you continue to slander my girlfriend like this, I'll go to the school forum and expose you for harassing girls. At that time, I'll see if you can still keep your reputation as the cool school hunk." Oliver turned his head to the side. My girlfriend was really determined this time. She didn't hold back at all. Before he could react, my girlfriend dragged me away quickly. Since then, Oliver seemed to finally believe it. I didn't reincarnate. He had a gift sent to me as an apology. He said he was too impulsive at the time. He said things he shouldn't have. The gift was a limited edition Cartier bracelet. Oliver is worthy of being a rich young master. He is really generous. My best friend sneered. "That's ridiculous. In your past life, you gave him 2 children. He never gave you anything. And you still call yourself Mrs. Smith. Just buy whatever you want." But then you turned around and bought his girlfriend a bunch of luxury goods. Now you're being all sweet on him. I sold the bracelet, made a tidy sum. Now I can afford to travel on my own. A few days later, Oliver asked to contact me again. He wanted to meet and apologize. I refused outright. My best friend said, "We'll accept the gift, but we don't need an apology. Let's just be strangers from now on." But Oliver was still not willing to give up. He probably wanted to find out if I had really been reborn. He came to see me again. My best friend stopped him outside the classroom. He said through the door, "Lucy, I really want to apologize to you. Can we meet?" My best friend said loudly. "Oliver, my best friend has a boyfriend. It's not convenient to meet you. If you keep this up, it will affect her reputation." Oliver suddenly stopped talking. My best friend was worried that he wouldn't believe her. She continued, "Her boyfriend will be here to pick her up soon. You should go now." There was silence outside the door for a while. Before he left, Oliver said, "Don't make excuses like that. If Lucy doesn't want to see me, just say so. I owe you one. If you ever need anything in the future, just let me know." This doesn't refer to the unpleasant things I said the other day. It's a debt from 5 years ago. Since that day, Oliver never showed up again. My best friend was still very worried. She took my roommates and started looking for a boyfriend for me. Meanwhile, someone on the school forum broke the news that Oliver and Isabella were dating. Rumor had it that Isabella was being harassed by some unruly teenagers outside school. It so happened that Oliver was passing by. He came to her rescue. Isabella thanked him by inviting him to dinner. In the following days, the two of them often participated in club activities together. The feelings they had nurtured since childhood quickly grew. I went on a few blind dates, but I didn't feel a connection with any of them. My best friend asked me what was wrong. I couldn't really explain. I just didn't feel it. My best friend thought about it for a few days. Then she contacted an old friend from out of town. That friend had a close friend named Ethan. Ethan would become famous a few years later at a national sporting event. Then I got divorced and lived alone. He happened to live next door. He often came to help me. She said by then she had already left the country. She didn't know much about what happened between me and Ethan. Although his family was not well off, "If you really like him, I will support you." I just muddled through. I wasn't really interested in sportsmen, but when he actually stood in front of me, I was completely stunned. We met at a milk tea shop next to the school. He was 185 meters tall, wearing a sports vest. His arm muscles were obvious. He had a strong build. He looked very manly. He was good-looking and handsome. His teeth were straight and white when he smiled. My best friend looked at me and froze. Then she said he was number 1 at the sports school. My best friend said that and left. I was left standing there awkwardly. The atmosphere suddenly became awkward. After a while, Ethan pointed at the empty snack bag and spoke. He stuttered a little, but what he said made my heart beat faster. "Lucy, you look so cute when you eat." It was the first time I'd heard anyone say that to me. I smiled sheepishly. "Thanks, I think so too." I reached for another cookie, but I felt an empty bag. I had to withdraw my hand awkwardly. I took a sip of milk tea. I touched my bracelet, and then my bag. Just then, a boy ran past me and snatched my bag. I was still in shock. Ethan dashed out like an arrow. He was incredibly fast. He caught up with the thief in no time. Amidst the gasps of the passers-by, Ethan subdued his opponent with a neat takedown. He grabbed my bag and ran back at lightning speed. "Here's your bag," he said a little out of breath. I stared at him in a daze. His face was flushed. He gave off the impression of being sweeter than milk tea. Time seemed to have come to a standstill. The passers-by stood in the distance. They whispered. Just then, Oliver appeared. He woke up abruptly. He pressed his hand against his chest. Outside, a car was honking its horn. He remembered something. He had decided to get a divorce. Lucy had not insisted. He let out a sigh of relief. The day after the divorce, he went to see his mother as usual. His mother refused to see him. She was still angry. She was quite satisfied with Lucy as a daughter-in-law, but since Oliver was determined to get a divorce, he must have given it a lot of thought. There was no turning back. Isabella asked him to meet her. She was more gentle and considerate than usual. She was dressed up beautifully. There was a hint of charm in her eyes. Oliver's heart stirred slightly, but because he was so busy at work, he didn't linger. There was no ambiguous relationship between him and Isabella. That's what he explained when he asked Lucy for a divorce. They grew up together. They were just friends. Their relationship was normal. Lucy's best friend sent a lot of WeChat messages, accusing him and Isabella. He casually looked at them. The screen was full of hurtful words. Every word stung. This was completely unlike the words of someone who was dying. It was the second month after the divorce. Lucy still hadn't contacted him. Oliver had grown accustomed to these days, except when driving, he inadvertently honked the horn twice. Lucy used to remind him to do this. It had been 6 months since the divorce. The image of Lucy appeared in his mind again. He had been thinking about her a lot lately. He looked at the food on the table. Something suddenly occurred to him. He picked up his phone. He opened the takeaway app. I ordered some spicy crayfish. It's Lucy's favorite dish. They really are very different. We're not even in the same league. He stared at the red crayfish and sighed helplessly. Just then, Aunt Mary came in and reported that Isabella was here. Oliver immediately asked, "What's wrong with her?" Aunt Mary looked puzzled. In the past, when Miss Isabella came, without saying why, Oliver would let her in. Aunt Mary said immediately, "I'll go and ask." Oliver waved his hand and said, "No need, just tell her I'm not here." In recent times, Isabella had been coming over a lot, mostly for trivial matters. She asked him to go to exhibitions at the gallery or to concerts together. They always had endless things to talk about. A suitable partner for remarriage should be someone with this kind of soul connection. A personality like Lucy's is not suitable. This was what he thought before the divorce, and he still thinks so now. He hears Aunt Mary talking to the nanny in the kitchen. "My daughter has only just got divorced, and she's already found a boyfriend 5 years younger than her. As her mother, I can't help but worry." Oliver stops in his tracks. How can a divorced woman start a new relationship so quickly? He never imagined Lucy would be with someone else. In the evening, he can't hold back any longer. He asks someone to find out what Lucy's been up to recently. His assistant tells him Lucy had already left the country. Her best friend had been living alone while recovering from an illness. She had passed away 3 months ago. Lucy had attended the funeral. The neighbor said Lucy was not planning to return. She had been accompanied when she left. Oliver's teacup in his hand shook. The hot tea spilled all over the table. She would not be coming back. That night, he did not sleep all night. He could not understand it. How could Lucy be so heartless? She wouldn't even see him, and she left her 2 children behind. She just left with someone else. Even if she hated him, as a mother she shouldn't have been so heartless. He suddenly woke up from his dream. Luckily, it was just a dream from his previous life. This time, he would definitely not let Lucy down. Lucy wouldn't hate him. He believed that Lucy was also a reincarnated person. Otherwise, she wouldn't have deliberately avoided him every time. He also decided to avoid this topic. Since there was a connection in the past life, they couldn't be husband and wife. At least they could still be friends. Just like in his dreams, he and Isabella got along. Thinking about this, he couldn't help but smile. Lucy was such a character. He didn't think she could be his friend. She was a bit silly and slow to respond. But wasn't it because she was so cute that he decided to marry her in the first place? He liked the way she listened attentively while eating snacks. If we could become good friends, it would be really interesting. Why do I always want to see her? The noise of the city slowly quieted down. It was very late at night. It was very quiet all around. It was just dawn. He set off to find Lucy. My face was still red. As soon as Oliver saw Ethan, his eyes immediately became angry. He said with resentment, "When I mentioned divorce, you immediately agreed. It turned out that you had someone else long ago." Oliver's eyes were red. It looked like he was heartbroken, but my best friend told me. He was the one who changed his mind first. Oliver didn't marry me because he liked me. He just thought I was more obedient. He didn't think I understood art and couldn't talk to him about literature. When we first got married, every time I got close to him, he did it like he was doing a chore, without any expression on his face. Slowly, he came to like this life, or rather, he has adapted. Oliver and I have 2 children, and Isabella and I are completely different people. She is literally his ideal wife. He is satisfied in every way. My best friend told me that she once loved Oliver deeply. That day when she ran into him and Isabella at the cafe on a date, she felt something was wrong. He never gave an explanation. Again and again, countless times. Whether it was the library or an art exhibition, he never took me there. They saw each other as soul mates. They often talked all night. Their relationship may not have been explicitly expressed. Therefore, when Oliver asked me for a divorce, he seemed justified. He said he had never owed me anything. Isabella had done nothing wrong. There was nothing wrong between them. He had just recognized his heart. He no longer loved me, my 2 children said. Aunt Isabella has a more aristocratic air than I do, and I do lack in etiquette. So, I signed the divorce agreement. The day I left the Smith family villa, no one came to see me off. I was especially surprised to hear this from my best friend. I really can't imagine myself falling for someone like Oliver. Could it be that intimacy is the accelerant of feelings? This time I will never let him touch me. Now, Oliver still wants to say something. I took Ethan's hand and ran out of the room. My best friend had said that she had to be present when I met Oliver. She wasn't there. Of course I couldn't pay him any attention. Ethan was tall, but he was obedient. He didn't ask any questions. He took my hand and led me around. I pointed in whichever direction I wanted to go. He followed me there. I took a moment to glance back at Oliver. He was standing there alone, like a pet dog that had been abandoned by its owner. Back at school, my best friend asked Ethan, "What do you think of Lucy?" Ethan's face was flushed. He looked simple and handsome. He said, "Lucy is a really nice person. She's cute and kind." My best friend nodded after hearing this. Satisfied, she continued to ask him a lot of questions. She wanted to make sure that his family background was clean. He didn't have a fiancée. There was no girl he grew up with, and there was no secret admirer. I was stunned. After listening to his explanation, my best friend said to me with a smile, "Since you like each other, I, as your best friend, can't stop you. How will you go on dates in the future? How will you develop your relationship? You decide for yourselves. But you have to promise me, you must treat Lucy well. If she is wronged, I will be the first to object." I hadn't reacted yet. Ethan had already nodded seriously in agreement. After Ethan left, I whispered, "Sophia, actually, your face turned red as soon as you saw him. You didn't even bother to eat the fried chicken in your hands." "Need I say more?" I said, rubbing the corner of my shirt. "He is tall. He is strong. His skin is shiny black. Just looking at him makes you want to eat." Is this what it means to like someone in Ethan's eyes? Am I as cute as a Zia Longbow? My best friend left helplessly. I thought that Oliver, the cold CEO, would walk away when he saw that I ignored him, but I didn't expect that he would instead stick to me like gum. After my best friend was reborn, she became very busy. She no longer spent time on makeup, shopping, or learning new skills. Instead, she studied hard. She even found time to open a campus online store. When we talked about my best friend's marriage, she told me she married the rich young man from the Johnson family in her previous life. That young man had a very successful career. He later took the family business abroad. The whole family moved overseas to settle down. Just like in a previous life, Ryan started to chase after my best friend again. He was a year older than us. He was handsome. He also had a good temperament. But this time, for some reason, my best friend didn't agree to him. She tactfully told the senior that she didn't think the two of them had much in common. Ryan was a bit surprised to hear this. My girlfriend may value appearance, but there are more than just Oliver who is good-looking at school. Ryan is the school heartthrob. My girlfriend is of course interested in him too. When he left, Ryan looked very unwilling. The next day, he asked my girlfriend out. My girlfriend deleted his WeChat. I asked my girlfriend, "Did Ryan do something to upset you in the past?" My girlfriend shook her head. "He has never treated me badly. He gave me my official title. Even though I didn't have a child. He didn't divorce me. There was no domestic violence. It's just that my best friend's smile was a little ironic. She said, after I fell ill, he sent me to the sanatorium without saying a word, and then he found a new love. He really didn't do anything wrong. He planned every step for himself. Men seem to be born knowing when to choose the path that is best for oneself. I didn't think about it that much. I only noticed that she said she was sick. My best friend and I have been playing together since we were little. She has always protected me. Every time someone bullied me, she stood up for me. I am a weak person. I always rely on her. She has always been very strong and very good. She is the most important person to me. I hugged my best friend tightly and cried out loud. My best friend comforted me and said, "Don't cry. There is a cure for this disease. You don't know if I married Ethan or not. Is it because you are no longer alive?" My best friend didn't expect me to be so witty. She was speechless. In the end, she agreed. She promised to take care of herself, never get sick again. I wiped away my tears. I looked at her angrily. She smiled and pulled me up. She said she would go shopping with me to let me relax. We strolled through the mall together. We went into every brand store. I chose a pink crystal necklace. I felt much more relaxed when I put it on. Do I look good? I turned around. I saw Oliver. He was looking at me. He was wearing a white Prada shirt and black slacks. He looked cool and elegant. Compared to before, he looked even more refined. He froze for a moment. Surprise and smugness shone in his eyes. "Lucy, no matter how hard you try, I will never be with you in this life." He hadn't finished speaking when I bumped into him. "You're in the way." I nudged him. He staggered. He almost lost his balance, but he didn't get angry. A hint of helplessness appeared on his face. It was as if he felt that I was deliberately picking a fight with him and deliberately picking a fight with him. My best friend immediately pulled me aside, glancing at him dismissively, and said, "We're leaving first." My best friend didn't want to deal with him, pulling me along as we left, but when I saw Oliver, a sudden surge of anger welled up in me. What right did he have to be reborn with my best friend? The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. Finally, I splashed the milk tea in my hand all over him. Oliver took a few steps back in shock at the cold liquid. His white shirt turned brown in an instant. He looked very disheveled, but he didn't seem to feel the cold. He just stared at me in disbelief. "Lucy, how could you do this?" I grabbed the shopping bag and threw it at him. My best friend had just managed to calm me down, but now my emotions were like a balloon about to burst. Why? My best friend had died young. He's fine. He's off with someone else. I eat a lot. I exercise a lot. I'm not fat. I kept hitting him with the bag until the mall security came and stopped me. It wasn't long before Oliver fell silent. A few of his friends were stopped outside by my best friend and some passers-by. After waiting for a while, my best friend came over and pulled me away. Forget it. He didn't mean it. I stood up. Oliver called my name with difficulty. His clothes were in a mess. His hair was still wet. He looked very disheveled, but I have to admit, he is quite handsome. At this time, there is a special kind of beauty, but I don't really appreciate this type of skinny guy. "Lucy, you are avoiding me like this. Do you still have feelings for me?" I turned around and kicked again. "I don't know you well." After Oliver heard this, his eyes blinked, with a smile on the corner of his mouth. It was as if he had seen through my pretense. My best friend looked at him and laughed with a hint of sarcasm. She asked, "Have you seen the WeChat message I sent?" Oliver froze for a moment, then his eyes widened. He was so smart. He understood at once. The person who had been reborn was his best friend. Not me. He finally understood. I was not the ex-wife he had lived with for 5 years, and I'm not Lucy, who gave birth to his 2 children. We have no relationship now. His obsession only annoys me. My best friend dragged me away for a while. Oliver was still sitting there, motionless. That night, I had a strange dream. In the dream, I got married. A long line of luxury cars, all the way to the Smith family. The young master of the Smith family had a bright future, a successful career. All the women envied me. Even my best friend said, "You've married well." I didn't feel happy about it. I just saw the trouble. But then I thought, I didn't really like anyone else. Marrying anyone would be the same. At least if I married Oliver, I wouldn't have to worry about money, and I wouldn't have to go to work every day. Forget it. I'll marry him. On our wedding night, Oliver and I were alone together. The atmosphere was a bit awkward. We hadn't gone out on many dates before getting married. We hadn't even held hands. I've never really looked at him before. Now I take a closer look. He's quite handsome. He's really skinny and pale. He looks like boiled chicken breast, dry and hard. Definitely not tasty. Oliver gives me a cold look and says, "Since you married me, you have to learn to be a good wife. Don't be a brat. Don't be selfish. Just live an honest life." What a jerk. You're just married and you're already setting rules for me. I rolled my eyes. I lay down and went to sleep. Oliver stood by the window for a while, then he got into bed too. He slept with me, but after a while, his hand crept up my waist. Just after setting rules for me, he wanted to have a baby with me. My girlfriends always say I'm not very clever. I admit I'm not very clever either, because I really can't understand Oliver's way of thinking. Forget it. We'll have a baby sooner or later. I rolled over, pinned Oliver down. What happened after that wasn't really worth talking about. His skinny body made me feel sick. The food tasted as bad as I'd imagined it would. When I forced him to do what I wanted, Oliver's face turned red. It was as if he found me shameless. I wasn't the only one in this bed who wasn't ashamed. He got angry. He ignored me for a long time, but I didn't care. I felt free. A few months later, I found out I was pregnant. I got pregnant right away. Things were going well with Oliver. He was distant, but he didn't make things difficult for me. I was quite comfortable, but other people didn't see it that way. They thought I'd just got married and already lost my husband's love. That must have been hard. Things suddenly changed between Oliver and me. The reason was that we were at a party one time. Someone slipped him a date rape drug. As a result, we had sex. Me, that was it. I got pregnant with our second child. This time, he was especially gentle with me. He really acted like a caring husband. Like any other rich second generation, he had a childhood sweetheart he grew up with, Isabella, and he often went on dates in front of me. They had coffee and talked. I didn't care when I first ran into them, and it affected their time alone. I hurried away, but Oliver misunderstood. He thought I was jealous. You're my wife. You have to be more tolerant, he said seriously. There's nothing between Isabella and me. You shouldn't embarrass her. He apologized to Isabella for me and gave her a lot of expensive things. When Oliver's mother learned about it, she called Oliver in front of her and scolded him severely. As a result, Oliver blamed me for it again. That night, he lost his temper with me. I could never understand why men like to exercise so much. The days just passed by. Oliver was clingy and always causing trouble. He was moody and would sulk over the smallest things. The two children were just like him. They knew their father was a rich playboy. They all vied to imitate him and tried hard to impress him. I occasionally tried to say something, but Oliver and his mother always interrupted me. Never mind. The children will carry the Smith name anyway. It's good to have someone to keep an eye on them. I thought that was how life would go on. But no, Isabella and Oliver grew closer and closer. Things changed. Oliver finally decided to divorce me. He never liked me as a wife from the start. This was really great news. I felt like I'd been sentenced to life imprisonment. Suddenly, I was granted a pardon. I was free. The day I got out, I ate 10 portions of fried chicken in one go. The diners around me were stunned. At that moment, someone came up to me. He smiled and said to me, "Classmate, do you remember me? That day after training, I was so exhausted, I almost collapsed. You gave me a portion of fried chicken. I slept until noon and didn't get up until then. When I woke up, I thought back over the content of the dream again. Oliver is really annoying. Ethan makes really delicious food. Ethan is really capable. He won the 3 major competitions early. The day he became a rising star in the sports world, he avoided the fans and came to find me downstairs in my dormitory. My best friend had expected this. She looked at me hiding behind her and said, "It depends on what Lucy thinks." I shyly nodded vigorously to my best friend. She dragged me out. Ethan saw me. His face turned red too. We both had a tinge of red in our tanned complexions. I had fair skin that flushed easily. It looked quite compatible. I walked Ethan to the school gate. When we parted, I touched his hand lightly. His hand was so hot. It was as inviting as freshly baked bread. I couldn't help it, and secretly touched his waist. It's so firm. It's even better than a personal trainer's. I couldn't hide the evil grin on my face. So I locked eyes with someone. Oliver looked at me with wide eyes. It looked like he had run all the way here. His shirt was all messed up. He was breathing heavily. He looked furious. He shouted, "Lucy, what are you doing?" Before I could say anything, Ethan spoke up. "It's not like I touched you. Mind your own business," he said. I put my hand back on his waist, which I had just retracted out of guilt. It was so embarrassing. My face was as red as a ripe shrimp. Oliver's lips were trembling. His body was also unsteady. "Lucy, is there someone else in your heart? How could you do this to me?" I ignored Oliver, said goodbye to Ethan. Then I went straight back to the dormitory in front of him. He stood there in a daze. That night, after my study session, I planned to go buy fried chicken. Oliver suddenly appeared. He stopped me on the way. This rich young master usually pays attention to his image. Unexpectedly, he stopped someone on campus. He stood in the moonlight. His eyes blinked and looked at me. There was a bright moon in the night sky. The night wind was a little cool, Oliver said. "I should have realized it a long time ago. Lucy, you forgot about me. That's why you didn't contact me for so long. You forgot about me. That's why you found another guy to make me angry. That's why you hurt me like this." I rolled my eyes. I was still thinking about going to buy spicy wings. Oliver sighed. "Forget it. If you still remembered what happened before, you would definitely hate me. It's better to start over. Right now, we still have a chance." The arrogant rich boy was jealous. He looked at me. His eyes were full of expectation. The excitement and joy on his face had not faded. He said, "In this life, let's start over. Let me chase you again. This time we will never be apart." I froze for a moment. I answered, But I never wanted to be with you." Oliver froze. I said directly, "In fact, I have no feelings for you." Oliver's eyes suddenly darkened. He clenched his lips. His face turned a little pale. He came up to me quickly, grabbed my wrist, insisted, "I don't believe it. In a previous life, You loved me so much. We lived together and had 2 children. I scratched my head, asked, if that was the case, why did we eventually separate? Oliver was silent for a moment, his eyes full of regret. I was so naive. I thought my wife had to be talented to work hard with me, but I overlooked that a woman who is virtuous and gentle and can take care of the home is the key to a happy life. I didn't take care of you much. You're just overthinking it. I held back the words that I was afraid he wouldn't be able to bear. Oliver frowned and asked if your best friend had told you something about me. I shook my head. I didn't want to say anything more to him. I just shouted loudly, security. Someone is harassing me. Oliver's eyes widened. The security guard came running as soon as he heard the noise. This rich kid who had grown up privileged had never encountered such a situation before. Oliver explained for a long time. Finally, he was allowed to leave. Oliver sent over a bunch of designer bags and cosmetics. My best friend told me to take it all. She said he owed me. I didn't think much of it. I nodded subconsciously. My best friend sighed and said, "You really need someone who can take care of you." Except for Oliver, I said. Ethan is a very straightforward man. My best friend smiled. Without saying anything, I never saw Oliver again after that. I heard that he was locked up at home by his mother to reflect on his actions. Isabella suddenly came to see me. She was still cute and stubborn, with a small, oval face. Only half my age. "Lucy, I've come to talk to you." I agreed. My best friend only told me to ignore Oliver. She didn't say I couldn't hang out with Isabella. She happily led me into the cafe. While I was eating cake, she took a sip of her Americano. While I was eating a macaron, she took another sip of her Americano. While I was eating tiramisu, she took a sip of her Americano. No wonder some people are so skinny. That's how they eat. "Lucy, you're actually quite clever. Oliver is only interested in girls like you for a short time. You said yes. He'll soon get bored. And then he'll realize you're not the person he wants. He needs someone he can talk to about his dreams and life, someone he can share his interests with." I looked at her in amazement. She'd guessed it all right. She really was a university graduate. Maybe my surprise was too obvious. Isabella's confidence suddenly weakened. He cleared his throat. He said, "I came to see you. I only want the best for you. I hope you can think calmly. Don't act impulsively. Otherwise, breaking up a few years later will be even more painful." I thought about it. I asked, "You want to be with Oliver?" My words directly stunned Isabella. She asked, "You said Oliver is so fickle. Then why is he able to be devoted to other girls?" I ate some cake. While I asked in puzzlement, "You are not his girlfriend. Why do you care about his love life?" She and Oliver actually had nothing to do with each other, but she put on the airs of a wife to lecture a third party. It was as if Oliver was already her private property. I suddenly understood. "You guys weren't engaged since childhood, were you?" Isabella hurriedly stopped me from continuing. "Don't talk nonsense. There's nothing between Oliver and me. I was just kindly reminding you." I let out a sound. I tried to recall the scene in my dream. I thought about what happened to Isabella in her past life. As a result, I found nothing. Ethan and I went abroad. We settled in the city where my best friend used to live. Many years passed. Then I received a postcard. Oliver had written a letter. It said, "Every birthday, he thinks of me. He wants to come and see how I am doing, but he is always too busy to come. His company is having problems. He has to sort them out first. If I were there, I would definitely support him silently and help him get everything ready. However, he does talk a bit too sweetly." Ethan got jealous after reading it. He wouldn't let me sleep all night. Oliver's mother also sent a letter. She said, "This is something Oliver always wanted to give me, but never got the chance to send it." I suddenly understood. Oliver at that time may have already died. I patted my head. I suddenly understood. It turns out that only those who die young can be reborn. It seems that Isabella has already married someone else. Isabella stood up with a pale face. She left. She left the cafe. We met again in front of the bathroom. She was a little shy. Her face was red. I couldn't help burping. The day Ethan and I got married, my best friend gave me a free all-you-can-eat card for a Michelin restaurant. Life after marriage is pretty much the same as before. The only difference is that I can eat more than before, because I use more energy, but I didn't realize. Ethan didn't want me to have children. He said his mother died in childbirth. He was worried. I confidently patted my chest and told him I could definitely have children. He clenched his teeth and asked me how I was so sure. I told him I had dreamed of giving birth to 2 children. I was only focusing on quantity, but not on quality. Ethan then asked, "Whose children would they be?" I immediately stopped talking. He sensed a subtle clue in my reaction. This man's insight was even stronger than I had imagined. As time passed, I became more and more aware of this. His career was booming. It was much better than in his previous life. Some people speculated. As he was such a famous sports star, why did he marry such an ordinary wife? He should hurry up and get a divorce and find someone more beautiful. In the middle of the night, Ethan went to the home of the person spreading the rumors with a fruit knife. "You dare to drive a wedge between me and my wife. You'll pay with your life." From then on, no one dared to say another word. At that time, my best friend had already become a famous businesswoman. She traveled around, living the life she wanted. In this life, she was in particularly good health. Oliver volunteered to work in one of the company's overseas branches. Before leaving, he came to see me. It was raining heavily. He stood under the shed not far away. He stared at me for a long time. He said, 4 years after the divorce, he got cancer. He passed away. I didn't get to see him for the last time. I already knew all this. Before that, Oliver's mother came to see me. She noticed that her son had been acting strangely lately. He kept coming to see her. She could tell that something was wrong. She believed in reincarnation. She quickly understood what had happened to Oliver. She said, her son had always been proud. He suffered a setback emotionally. It was understandable. I didn't think he had fallen so hard. I think it's okay. There are more people who are less fortunate than him. He just couldn't stand to see me doing so well. Time passed slowly. Ethan and I grew closer and closer. Since then, I haven't heard anything about Oliver.